Hi, I'm Ed Czuprynski, attorney. I'm running for judge because I want to make a difference. You want to make a difference. You know, together we can. Click the share button. Send this message out. And be sure to vote on Tuesday. You know why? Because in a small community like ours, your vote can make the difference. How political corruption has permeated the local courts and impact on domestic violence cases. Well, that's a heavy subject. We're talking about how corrupting politics are influencing local courts. Where did all this start? How is it, for those who don't know, Judge Timothy Kelly, whom I'm opposing, has been handling all the domestic violence cases for nearly a dozen years, okay? Most of that time, he was doing it illegally. He did not have any legal authority to get them all. Before he was elected in 2000, the domestic violence cases were being distributed by a blind draw between the three judges. The problem, I should say, in order to understand the problem, you've got to understand the history of the problem, okay? And I can speak from experience because I've been involved in the local court system for 40 years. Started young. But you have to go back 43 years. That's what that's up there for. It was 43 years ago that the corrupting influence of local politics began to seep into our court system. 43 years ago. And you know what's amazing? And this is really the root of the problem. There's never been a changeover since. Can you believe it? For 43 years now, this has been a self-perpetuating political phenomenon in Bay County. For 43 years, we've had a succession of prosecutors, but never once any turnover in the attorneys or the secretarial staff. And so what happens is that it creates a political inbreeding in your courthouse, which is what I've witnessed in my years' experience. And this political inbreeding, as I've seen it, breeds judges out of the prosecutor's office. Penzine, it served him well too, frankly, to be honest with you, because what happened is that it was when Penzine was there, and I'm not sure the year, but when he was prosecutor, there's a special law passed in Michigan that created the Third Circuit Court judgeship, because we only had two at the time. And so this new law was passed, creating this new judgeship. And lo and behold, the first term of office for this newly created judgeship would be 10 years, a 10-year term. Judicial terms are usually 6. 10 years. And I guess the argument was that, well, they had to space it out that way, so every 2 years would be a judge, elected. Okay, fine. I'm sure there could have been something else brokered. But that was the terms. And so Eugene Penzine declared his candidacy. The machine embraced him, promoted him, got him elected. What happened? His chief assistant prosecutor, George Mullison, is then appointed prosecutor by the judges, including Penzine. And the same staff and the same lawyers all continue to work in the same courthouse. There is one upset in this history in that Mullison was challenged on his re-election in 1992. And that was done by Joe Sheeran, who won, who beat Mullison, which was kind of unusual, and within the fact that there was a Democratic primary that he beat him. But what happened is that Joe Sheeran continued the same secretarial staff and the same lawyers. There was only one attorney who was let go, and that was Jeannie McGavin. And she did the friend of the court work. But with the exception of her, he perpetuated the same staff. And in exchange, they all gave him the loyalty that Eugene Penzine instilled. And so years go by, and it's now 2000. And what does Chief Prosecutor Sheeran do? He goes to his Chief Assistant Prosecutor, his right-hand man, Tim Kelly, and he says, you know what? You'd make a good judge. Why don't you run for district judge? There's a seat open. Kelly jumps on it, announces his boss, Sheeran, an elected official who has his own political machinery and apparatus in place, throws his full support behind the man, Kelly, and then publicly endorses him. I mean, I couldn't believe when that happened, because I actually bought an ad and publicized about the fact that this isn't right when we have a prosecutor, endorsing a judicial candidate. What about the separation of powers? What about the, balance? And but the voters decided, and Kelly was elected. What happened as soon as he took office? Big changes. The biggest change was that it was when Kelly took office that all of a sudden domestic violence cases were not assigned to a judge by a blind draw like they are on all other cases. No. Instead, all of a sudden, all the domestic violence cases were assigned to Kelly, even though there's no law or rule that allowed it. In fact, the law and the rule was that judges were to be assigned by random draw to ensure the integrity of the whole judicial system. Well, guess what? It wasn't followed. Kelly got elected, and practically overnight, very quickly, he began to get all the domestic violence cases. And so this monopoly of DV cases by the former chief assistant prosecutor, who was promoted into his judgeship by the prosecutor, actually has a traceable pattern that is very revealing. For instance, immediately, domestic violence charges and cases increased immediately. Okay? And it increased to such an extent, and you've got the literature with you tonight, so I don't have the stats in front of me, but at least it's from 2008 to 2011, while the general rate of crime in Bay County dropped something like 13% or something. It's in my literature. At the same time, the domestic violence cases are increasing. And why is that? Why is that? Because the corrupting influence of politics, dating back 43 years in this community, allowed it. The protest rally we had at the courthouse was probably, I'm not sure, about a month and a half ago. But anyway, that got published on MLive. We had over 60 comments, I believe it was. But there were people, there's a certain amount of people, and I think really they're in the courthouse. I really think that's where those anonymous contributions posted come from. Can't prove it, but why won't they put their name on it? And when they were running these vicious attacks on me, and you can go back and read them, I started commenting. I said, look, I've got this presentation planned on October 17th. You want something to say? Come and say it to my face. We're going to have an open mic. And I say this to you, any of you folks here, if you're one of those anonymous critics, I invite you to step forward tonight. Speak your say, and tell us your name, and then we'll listen to you. And anyone who is in attendance and can't do that or won't do that, then they have nothing valid. to offer. Let me tell you something. You'd have to be in the trenches. You'd have to be a defense lawyer to see what's happening. It's really ridiculous. It's just disgusting. Because, not only did Judge Kelly, the domestic violence king, start getting all the DV cases, but he also started to impose some very burdensome and unreasonable conditions on a person's bond before they're even tried. That didn't make sense. And so I began to look at this thing and thinking, there's got to be more to it than this. I mean, I know this man has this need for power. You can see that. I've been watching for 10 years plus. And it's very obvious. You want a little entertainment, go to the courthouse on a Friday and watch him sentence people. Sit in the back and watch it. He loves to lecture them. He'll spend 20, 30 minutes on a sentencing that other judges will take 5 minutes on. And so I'm thinking, well, I always thought it was just a matter of power, but then I got thinking, this is, crunching the numbers, doing the math, it's a lot of money, $37.50 per defendant who goes through the system without being convicted of anything, has to pay every week. So I filed a letter to the county under the Freedom of Information Act and asked them to reveal how much they're taking in per year on these daily PPT tests, which are administered at the jail. Okay, it doesn't have to be sent into a lab or anything. They just blow in this little straw, record the reading, throw the straw away, put a new one on, and the next guy steps forward and blows. Would you believe between 60 and 70,000 a year? Okay, new money. That wasn't there until Kelly took office. This has been going on for so many years, we start checking into it. And we discovered that this money is now part of the bloodline of the county, if you will. The sheriff's budget now anticipates a certain set sum that they budget right into their budget. I mean, they plan on this money coming in as a part of their expenditure program. So it's budgeted in, locked in. Tax, in my opinion, tax on the working poor. Okay? Because if you're somebody and you're in his court, because you have a domestic violence case, first off, if you're somebody, oftentimes you don't get busted. But if you are, you're not going to have that kind of a condition imposed. And so it's across the board on everyone except certain individuals. This man was, through the manipulations of Timothy Kelly, deprived of his daughter's company and love for 3 months, and he had been the custodial parent of the child for 12 years. Prosecutor ended up throwing the case out against him as a domestic violence. And that's the problem. We're gonna hear from Art Dorr tonight. Art's in the hospital. Okay, he's having a kidney transplant, and I heard from his office today that he's doing good. And so is Wendy, the donor. So let's hear from Art. Art Dorr, in my opinion, is a pretty good guy. He's done a lot to this community. He's given a lot to this community. Certainly a controversial figure, but I can identify with that. And sometimes it's the lightning rod that strikes the changes that have to be made. And Art Dorr is a man who stood up and was counted in basically endorsing me. Because Art Dorr was the victim of Kelly and the prosecutor's abuse. That's what's wrong. Right now we have a prosecutor and a judge like this, okay? They're tight. So what does that mean? That means that the prosecutor knows that he can bring a case on, a domestic violence case, assured that he's going to get Kelly, who's in tight with him, and be able to make it fly regardless of whether there's any adequate investigation or not. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many times an argument ensues, a neighbor calls 911, not one of the people involved, in an argument. The cops come out. One thing leads to another. They're arresting the male or the female, whichever the case may be. It's usually the man. And ready to haul him away when the wife says, well, wait a second, nothing happened. What are you doing? I understand that in city-based city, the insurance company, risk management, requires that when the police go out on a call for a domestic violence case, they have to arrest one or the other. Okay? Because they require it as part of their negligence insurance terms. And state law does require that if the police go out on a call for domestic violence and there's probable cause to believe that it did happen, then they must arrest one of the two people involved. And I guess I have no problem with that. I mean, if there's probable cause, for crying out loud, let's separate them and, do what's right. But let's not do what's wrong. And you're going to hear Art Dorr go, relate. This was a 71-year-old, 72-year-old man who was arrested, never had been convicted of a crime in his life. Good guy, contributor to this community. And Kelly, it was Asbury, who you folks, or not you folks, but our community just reelected, God forbid. And so Kelly brings this case out against Art Dorr because, in Art's opinion, it was a political thing. Get his name in the headlines and that. Well, his girlfriend did not want any part of it, refused to testify, asked them, why are you doing this? Drop this thing. They refused. Yeah, they refused. And this isn't the only kind of case. This happens a lot in this community. Art Dorr happens to be a name, though, that we can relate to. All right? And so these folks had been a couple for 12 years. He and his girlfriend, lady friend as he called her. And the judge ordered them to remain separated. I think it was about 3 months they were separated. By court order. Tim Kelly's order. So, we, the community taxpayers, paid for a 3-day jury trial. It's the judge, that's a court reporter, that's a prosecutor, that's the bailiff, that's witness fees, everyone's time inconvenienced. 3-day jury trial. An acquittal in less than half an hour. Wow. Sick and tired of what's happening in this courthouse, in this town. And I'm willing to stand up and be counted and run against His Highness and the powers that be with the objective of dethroning him. And if the voters reelect him, they deserve it. Because I'm offering them an alternative. It's very difficult to beat a sitting judge. And if I wanted to do it, the opportunity would have been 2 years ago. Okay? But 2 years ago, we had a good field of candidates. I could not sleep with myself if I didn't challenge the reelection, the recreation, the continuation, the perpetuation of what I'm telling you about tonight. Tim Kelly should be stopped. There's no reason why. There is no reason why he should be the self-proclaimed domestic violence king. And there's no reason why we as a community should tolerate it. Now, they do it in the courthouse, okay? And all the lawyers, they kiss up to him. And they do it with all the judges, frankly. Well, most lawyers, not all of them. But. So, I'm a product of the 60s, and that's what motivates me now in 2012. I could not rest easy and be comfortable with myself if I did not try and make a good conscious effort to stop the abuse of our citizens, the perpetuation of power, the way let me tell you, I can equate it this way best. In the morning at the courthouse, what they do is they all get around in this big circle, okay? And then they scratch each other's back. That's how they start every morning in the courthouse. And you know, when the old courthouse, what's now the county building, they had the public defender's office in a separate building, and probation department was in a separate building. Now they're all under this one roof. And you know what? I didn't like it then, and I like it even less now, because it builds this coziness, this camaraderie, this sense that this is our business, this is our courthouse, not yours, the public. We're the people, and we should insist on quality from not only the secretarial staff or the people like that, clerks, but from our judges too. By what right does Kelly get away pulling these stunts? We have an opportunity to stop it this year, okay? And I really believe in my heart that we can do it, okay? I'm looking to you folks as the catalyst to make this reform happen. And I had that instrumental role in the past in county government, and I'm here to tell you I can have that instrumental role in the state of your local courts. But I can't do it without your help. John Lemming was the kind of judge I'd like to think I could be. He was a down-to-earth guy. He understood people. He understood their problems. He understood that we make mistakes. You know, this effort to make a difference. We can make a difference. And you know, it's so sad when I look back on the way it used to be to the way it is now. It's disturbing. We don't care enough. And those who do don't number enough. What is happening in this community? Why are we putting up with this? This is the same guy who for over a decade acted without legal authority and doing all the domestic violence cases. This is why I'm running, okay? And it's going to be a big sacrifice if I win, because it's going to be a pretty good pay cut. Plus, I can't have my practice of law anymore. Heck, it cost me $35,000 at least when he froze me out of 75% of the cases for 2 months. And I have overhead. I have staff. I have mortgages, like everyone else. Man. And I realized at the time, wow, this is really a hit. Sure, I was willing to self-finance my campaign, but I didn't know I was going to have to really tighten the belt and actually borrow money to make ends meet for 2 months, because this guy was vindictive and he retaliated by abusing his power. And again, it's that power. It's the intimidation. It's the good old boy system in this town. We've got to break it up. And this is the year to do it. Thank you. Anyone else? I'm sorry?
Margaret DeHughes. A comment first. I think each of us heard these stories this evening should walk out of here deeply concerned. Whether we have actually faced an incident in the local courts or not. Therefore, the grace of God could go any one of us someday.
So true.
Who among us have not had an argument with someone that could have escalated at some point? One of the important points I think that you made tonight is the fact that they are budgeting this money that they get from doing these alcohol tests. Once that is part of the budget, it is very hard to get them to change.
Absolutely.
Because they need that money.
That's right. It's part of the sheriff's budget at this point.
I am brand new to the area. I'm not familiar with all the problems, the different issues that are presented, and I'm trying to familiarize myself with that. But when I hear these things, and I sense that judges have elevated themselves on some kind of pedestal where they feel that they can interpret laws in their self-imposed understanding of how that should work, irregardless of what any other rulings have ever said. That deeply bothers me.
And it should.
We are all human beings. We make mistakes and we deserve the right to be treated respectfully and with justice and fairness. Justice appears to have gone out the window with many of these cases that you presented tonight. And my question is, if this is happening in this area with the domestic violence cases, what about the other cases? Logic tells me that once this kind of attitude is pervasive in one area, it just seeps into all the other areas too.
Oh, it certainly can. Certainly can. That raises a question. We had, let me just take a quick look at these questions that came in on our email and Facebook. You've been described as a gadfly on M Live, are you? And luckily they gave me the definition of a gadfly, because I wouldn't know it. A gadfly is a person who upsets the status quo. You're damn right I'm a gadfly, and I'm proud of it. Some people say you're too flamboyant to be a judge. What's your response? Well, you know what? Maybe we need a little more of that down-to-earth flamboyance, you know? I'm tired of this holier-than-thou attitude that some of these judges have. This is an interesting one. You've been a defense lawyer your whole career, which is true. So how would you expect to be a judge and not hold the same bias in your new capacity that you claim judges who used to be prosecutors hold? What makes the difference? The big difference is that I'm not part of that good old boy system. Okay? And the good old boy system, there's been this political inbreeding in the courthouse for way too long, where prosecutors are elevated to judge, and then their chief assistant prosecutors are elevated to the chief assistant. And it continues and goes in 43 years. It's perpetuated. When you experience the injustice and travesty of justice as a defense lawyer that happens through these prosecutor and judges acting in concert in cahoots, I think it gives you a different, a very needed insight on the courts and the predicament and the wrongful structured system imposes on people who are accused of crime. Because not everyone who's accused of crime are guilty. We need a system that can ensure, equal justice for everyone, and not just the select few that the self-anointed kings over there in the courthouse feel should get it. It should be for everyone. Why is that? I mean, I could tell you some of the stuff they put me through because I stood up to them. And I will stand up to them till my last breath. Thank you. And here's another thing that happens with the prosecutor's office and the judge when they're in collusion like this in this town. The prosecutor will go, and particularly this is true if it's a poor person, they'll go and argue that this person should have a high bond. Domestic violence is, it's a misdemeanor charge. So King Kelly will set a real high bond because his colleagues want it. And then they put the poor guy, remember that one, the Casey Slates case that was up there? I didn't handle that case. I wasn't the lawyer on that case. Okay. But an attorney in town told me about it. And in that case, they put that trial off for, 3-4 months. And what they'll do is they'll put some poor guy in the jail, hike up his bond, stall the day of trial, keep adjourning it because D.V. King Kelly handles all domestic violence cases, and there's more domestic violence cases than anything else because the prosecutor's office is in cahoots with him. It's just a crazy, frightening cycle. And what they'll do is they'll keep somebody in jail to the extent that they'll say, well, just cop a plea and we'll release you. Well, he served 2 months of a 3-month maximum crime. I've seen people lose their jobs in situations like this. So that's why it does matter in this town with that judge on those kind of cases. Because it gives them a free hand to do whatever they want to the people, and I see that happen all the time. That's why I'm running. Let's just seize the opportunity, and let's make it happen. And in the letter I said, hey, there's a guy on M Live who said, or it could have been a woman, I don't know. Someone on M Live said, why don't these two debate like, people on the stump do, candidates, so let them square off and debate. And I responded at the time, I said, fine with me. Kelly never responded to it. So when this program was set up and I had rented this place, I sent him this letter. And I said, hey, I'll cancel tonight's event if you'll come in and debate me. Let's talk about the issues. Get a neutral panel of people to ask questions so it's not loaded or stacked. He never responded to that letter. Okay? I was even willing to pay the whole price. Well, I was not surprised he didn't respond to that letter. What can he say? What kind of response can you offer when you illegally retaliate against a lawyer and ban him from cases, and an outside judge has to come in and say, stop that now? That's not true. And when they say that domestic violence affects the whole family, children are often either eyewitness to it or hear it from another room. I'll tell you something. If there is a child who's being impacted, then there should be a no contact order. But, you know, it's like the Matt Brakey case you read about, the Casey Slater case you read about. There's no rhyme or reason or rational purpose in doing it. And so who's really being harmed here? The kids. The kids. Matt Brakey had his daughter custodial parent for 12 years. And he was forced into separation from his daughter for 3 months before the prosecutor dropped the case after King Kelly abused Mr. Brakey's rights and the unspoken rights of the child. It's a philosophy most domestic violence courts follow. They have one judge dedicated to domestic violence. That's true in communities that have actually set up true bona fide domestic violence courts, which we have never done. Who, based on training and experience, understands the cycle of domestic violence. You know what? What a crock. He has no training or experience whatsoever that specializes him in that field. And there he is pontificating about it. These are some of the most difficult cases to handle. Yeah, especially when they put up some resistance to his abuse. I look at handling domestic violence cases almost as homicide prevention. That's symptomatic of the problem in this town. Overcharging, okay, and blowing out of proportion. Illustrates it. Okay, King, what do we got next? Kelly, however, said the court system is more efficient as it is and due largely to the working relationship he shares with his peers. Oh, really? What about 2 years ago when I filed suit about all the domestic violence cases going to you without legal authority? What about that, Judge? Judge Barnes told you she thought it should be by blind draw. Her challenger, now Judge Barnes, or Janer, he agreed. And what did you do? 3 days passed, and then he signs an order on his own saying, no, I did them all. There won't be any blind draw with me. Well, is that a working relationship he shares with his peers when he goes, I'm going to do what I want. I'm not, and no, I don't care what you think. We're not going to follow the law that had always been followed before I took office. Have a blind draw. The arrogance of making that kind of a claim in light of his history. The working relationship he shares with his peers. Yeah, Don Clyda, Judge Clyda, whom he teamed up with in keeping me off of 75% of the case. That's a good working relationship. You know, only what? It wasn't legal. That's the problem with it. An outside judge says, stop it. That's the working relationship he has with his peers. It seems very appropriate under the circumstances that he is not here. He didn't have the nerve. Didn't want to answer the questions, the hard questions, because there were no answers.